Welcome to the Sick of This Show with Nick and Fred. We've got special guests today, Nazi hunter, fellow veteran, and someone who has earned my respect in so many ways,
Same.
um, Kristofer Goldsmith,
Thank you, brother.
um, and co-host of the Find Out podcast, who we had Tim Fullerton on earlier this week. So please go check those guys out. They're freaking amazing. I will drop their links here in the chat here in a moment once I get mine started on the computer so that everybody has it. Please, Fred, go ahead before we introduce
Yeah,
our
for
great
sure.
guest.
No, Chris,
Or
it's
would you like to introduce Chris a little bit and let him say hi?
yeah, I just want to say, dude, great having you on here. I've loved your stuff. Especially with the latest thing you got, this project you got dropping. So tell us about yourself, like what got you into being as vocal and active as you are with On Offense, and what's this documentary that you just published?
Yeah, so um, my career is a little less than traditional, and I'm going to give like the 30-second version of a 20-year arc. Right, I joined the Army and graduated high school in 2003. Was in basic training by January 2004. Was in Iraq January 2005. Came home really fucked up. Ended up getting kicked out of the military with a bad paper discharge, which meant I was stripped of my GI Bill. And I came out into the Great Recession. So not only was I unemployable, but there just simply weren't jobs out there. So I went through like a 5 year dark period. Thankfully, with a general discharge, I still had access to VA healthcare. And it took, I mean, I'm still putting myself back together, but 5 years of like really intensive, like once a week, a few times a week kind of care. And that's how I found veteran advocacy. I became kind of really focused on the injustice of bad paper discharges. I learned that they were happening to something like 10% of all of the Marines who left during, I think, 2012, which is just, that's tremendous. That is too large of a number to be realistic. Like 10% of all Marines leaving the force deserve to not have the GI Bill. That's right. So anyway,
No.
that's how I ended up, you know, fighting on reforms around bad paper discharges, which back in the day, 2008, like that, I was an outcast. Like the veterans community did not welcome me or anyone else with bad paper. I gradually started to change the veteran service organizations, the big influential ones like VFW, DAV, American Legion, and the rest. And the culture has changed over the last, decade and a half. Now, vets who have other than honorable discharges can get health care from the VA, especially emergency health care that used to be flat out denied. I mean, if a vet with an OTH discharge, you know, at least survived a suicide attempt, the VA would still say, sorry, according to our records, you're not a vet. Doesn't matter how many deployments you have. So, I started working for Vietnam Veterans America, and they gave me the broad policy portfolio of young veterans, which was every issue related to veterans for anyone under the age of like 60, which is everything. So they let me do what I was passionate about. And being the resident millennial working for an organization by and for people in their 70s, naturally, I started helping them with social media. And that is how I got into first studying disinformation, because I found an imposter account that was the Russians pretending to be my employer at the time.
Mm.
And disinformation leads to radicalization and extremism. So I've spent the last half decade focused on internal threats rather than external threats from the United States. So the documentary World White Hate focuses on how the United States has, especially over the last decade, become a net exporter of terrorism. There are white supremacist gangs, ideologies, books, and other propaganda that have inspired mass shootings, mass casualty events all over the world because of what had been started and really advanced within the borders of the United States.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting because, I've done some research on hate groups, especially with like dealing with the manosphere, and you kind of look at how they structure their programs. It's absolutely a pipeline because for what a lot of people don't really understand about this is that you go in steps, right? And you're looking for people who maybe, and this is why your work with veterans, is so important. People that have bad paper discharges that have been kind of shut out, then are like, these hate groups will go to them and say, hey, society doesn't want you, but we want you, right?
Hmm.
And they'll blame other groups, immigrants, other ethnicities, women, everything else. And with the accessibility with people online, it's even more dangerous now because it's not just some guy, you know, hanging outside talking to you one on one, trying to recruit a 14-year-old or any of that. It's they're pumping this out, you know, and so that's why the work you're doing is like super important, dude. And we really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
you like I feel like the mainstream journalists who are not experts in this field, right? So let's give them the benefit of the doubt. But mainstream journalists and talking heads on television have started to associate veterans with extremism,
Yeah.
especially in the wake of January 6th. But what folks should recognize is that veterans are recruited by extremist organizations not because they're vulnerable because of PTSD or a failure to transition into civilian life, though that can be a very vulnerable point in their life, and those things can be exploited. The reason extremist organizations try and recruit us is for the same reason that Fortune 500 companies do,
Mhm.
right? It's for all the good things about veterans, all of the good stereotypes, like being a team player, understanding when you're learning something, having it in your mind, how am I going to train the person behind me? Understanding, the respect that comes with a chain of command, the camaraderie, right? The small team building.
Mhm.
Those are the things that extremists want to exploit most, and the brand, right? The
Yeah,
veteran brand that that I have built my career on, right? The reason I'm doing this interview, the reason that people read my Substack is because I'm a veteran and I'm sharing the veteran experience.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to actually ask on that veteran experience because we're all vets here. I'm an Army vet. Chris is an Army vet. Fred's a Marine vet who likes his navy blue crayons. Sorry, you get me
Yeah, I mean,
confused all the time with the
what would you?
navy.
The best crayons to eat are navy blue, bro. You
Oh
know.
yeah, absolutely. Um, is how can we help create, because you're part of what I'm trying to describe as the new manosphere.
Mhm.
Is it's a manosphere that's not toxic. It's we're promoting like actual good values and manhood and manliness that aren't about abuse. What can we do as part of that new group of white dudes who are coming out of the woodwork to talk about this? And as veterans, what can we do to more take back that that narrative?
Yeah, I remember, uh, over a year ago, when Harris first became the nominee, and we saw the group pop up, White Dudes for Harris, and I remember seeing that, and I was like, "Ooh, I don't know, man. Like that feels like a bad idea. Like it feels like the left is going to jump all over that and call these guys misogynists and white supremacists, all that shit." But I think that the organization and the organizers behind it very quickly showed that we recognize, we speaking as white dudes who were for Harris, we recognize that our identity comes with privilege that we can wield for good, right? We have, I think, culturally, at least on the left, we have, for better or worse, come to realize that we need to take a step back. People who look like me need to get out of the front of the room, sit in the back and listen.
Mhm.
But I have always felt that this, when it comes to the Nazi thing, right? Like, I'm not going to ask people of color or women or people from the the LGBTQ community to do the work that I do, because it is inherently harmful, and it's more harmful for them and more dangerous for them than it is for someone who looks like me, who grew up with my privilege, right? And I think that until the White Dudes for Harris thing started to actually succeed, I couldn't see that these two things were the same. Like,
Yeah.
I was not asking anybody else to fight Nazis because I felt I had a responsibility, because I feel safe, as safe as you can, comparative to anyone else who could do it, according to any other identity.
Yeah.
And I started to realize, look, with all of the racism and sexism that exists in our politics, and that is part of the MAGA brand, it's going to take people like us, people who look like us, to stand in the breach, to take the heat, to throw the punches, so that other people who've been working their fucking asses off and getting their lives threatened just for, posting on Twitter for the last 15 fucking years, so that they can relax, that they can recuperate, right? That they can take a fucking break, because they haven't. They haven't been able to. It's been a fight for survival that you and I haven't had to engage in.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that. So I wanted, because I know a lot about the work you do. I follow a lot of the stuff you do. Um, one, I didn't get to thank Fred on our show yesterday, but thank you for the work that you guys are doing for veterans, about stopping the losses at the VA. It inspired 3 of my poems about it, because you basically prevented me from losing my healthcare more. Um, and so for those who might not know, I'm a disabled veteran. I use the VA. It's my only source of healthcare for myself.
Same.
Like I don't have a secondary source of healthcare. I lost my job a month ago. I'm working on doing other jobs, but you can't get healthcare privately cheap, especially not for a family. So I'm lucky I'm a disabled veteran. And I say that as in, I'm lucky that I have a hospital I can go to for ER care whenever I need to. But I lost my doctor, and the work you've been doing is amazing. So I really wanted to thank you for that, because it stopped me losing my healthcare. But I wanted to then segue that into the other work that you're doing, because you're talking about it in the Nazi hunting. And I want to dig in on the Nazi hunting stuff a lot, because I titled this show On Offense, or On Peaceful and Patriotic Offense. Because Fred Wellman talks about it a lot. You talk about it a lot. Ken Harbaugh talks about it. All of the veterans talk about it, is peaceful and patriotic. And you do Task Force Butler. You have this other side too, outside of the Find Out podcast, but I think it ties intrinsically together now in the goal. In like the end goal is to rid ourselves of the hate and the fascism and the white supremacy. Can you talk a little bit more about Task Force Butler, and maybe ways people can get more involved with you? Because our audience is hungry for action and what they can do.
Yeah. So I have 2 nonprofits that are kind of like dual branded. I think this one says Veterans Fighting Fascism, right? But I also run Task Force Butler Institute. Both are 501c3s. Task Force Butler Institute, the mission is to train veterans to conduct open source intelligence research into these domestic extremists, so that we can do things like write reports, present evidence, engage with journalists and public education, so that we can impose costs on the fascists, on the people who are, physically assaulting people because of their identity, who are terrorizing neighborhoods with racist and worse propaganda. Veterans Fighting Fascism is more public facing, more public education. And though it does have veteran in the name, it is meant to inspire all Americans to fight fascism where they can, right? I'm a millennial. I grew up with the internet, right? And I think that our generation has been so focused because of, even the early days of Facebook and Twitter. We've been so focused on what happens in Washington, D.C. We forget that politics matters most where you can impact it. And that's in your own backyard. That's your school board, right? That's your town council. That is the place where book bans are happening. That is the place where, redlining in its most modern form is basically permissible. And that is where you as individual Americans can fight back. So Veterans Fighting Fascism, our big project on that side is the Anti-Fascist Book Club. It is a way to give people an excuse give people the tools to create a third place, right? Outside of home and outside of work, so that people can meet, build trust together, and literally fight fascism in their own backyards. So for folks who want to get more involved with Task Force Butler, I wish that I had a way
I
for
dropped
that
a
to
link
happen.
for you already too.
Yeah. So, we just don't have the money for staff. We don't have the money for training. We don't have the money for volunteer coordination, right? I have people reach out to me saying all the time, I just want to work for you for free. I don't have the time to engage with people who want to work for me for free. It's the worst feeling in the world.
I
That
think
is
I'm
why,
actually one of those people that did that too.
yeah, like I have an email inbox with hundreds of emails that I can never respond to because I don't have the bandwidth and I don't have the resources. So that is why we created Veterans Fighting Fascism, because this is work that everyone can do. And if you want to take your anti-fascist book club and hunt Nazis, you go to taskforcebutler.org, you look for our resources tab, and we have instruction manuals on how you can do this locally, on how you can. We don't recommend and we don't tell you how to infiltrate extremist organizations. That is not something you can teach in a pamphlet. But we do teach people like what you can do in real time when you see extremists, whether it's at a protest or, wearing masks and putting up stickers walking down the street. Because if you're watching this, you have the power to impose costs on fascists. Just go to taskforcebutler.org, go to the resources tab, and look for our street teams guide and for our community response guide.
Awesome. That's so cool because that fits in so well with. So I dropped all the links for Task Force Butler, Unite for Veterans, Veterans Fighting Fascism. Please go sign up for the mailing list, at least for any of the organizations, specifically the Unite for Vet and Veterans Fighting Fascism, because those are two groups that I follow and I get emails from. It's a lot of really good information. And like Chris said, it's knowing what to do and how to do it safely. And Chris, you said it the other day, I think it was on the Find Out podcast, was if you find someone who's a fascist, and it's what we figured out is it's okay to attack somebody on a personality trait, not on personhood. Personality trait is fascism. You're a dick and a bigot and a Nazi because you're a fascist. Like, I'm going to attack you every single day, and I'm going to drop, like you said, drop a Google Maps pin on their house, quarter-mile radius, and drop off pamphlets or just pictures and a quote of what they said, and they will leave town very, very quickly.
Yep.
I know that's possibly a dangerous thing to do also, especially if you live in redder areas. If we were to do that or encourage behaviors like that, especially in, say, Arkansas, where I am, or Texas, where a lot of my viewers are out of, or even Florida, how do you recommend people safely do that?
Yeah, use the mail. So first of all, you want to be sure that you are not breaking the law. Like none of the recommendations that are in any of our pamphlets recommend that anyone break the law. I am an anti-fascist. That doesn't mean that I'm, an activist out there like taking swings at people.
We're
right?
pro-constitutional, pro-law and order here. That's our whole thing, is like we win on constitutionality.
Exactly. So there are things now, when I say use the mail, like the way that I got Thomas Rousseau, the founder of Patriot Front, to leave his childhood home and to abandon it and to, have to set up a headquarters somewhere else was I mailed to over 200 people a document that, didn't dox him, right, but identified him as someone who lives in the neighborhood. This is the car he drives. And this is what he's been up to, leading this fascist organization. And the reason that I sent that mailer out, again, using the mail, not communicating a threat, not engaging in any harassment, not encouraging any harassment, was because he had people of color living in that neighborhood. Neighbors who saw, that red car driving down the street when their kids are playing in the street ought to know that a Nazi's driving, because that's a safety issue, right?
Yeah.
So I I think that people, when they want to get involved in something like this, you're going to have, especially if you're in a group, you're going to have the good idea fairies who are going to come in and you're going to amp each other up, right? But you need to write it down and read it and look at it and say, am I going too far? Am I breaking the law? And if the answer is yes to either of those questions, you cross that out and you start planning again.
Good.
Because
Thank you for that
this,
really good info. Yeah, go
I
ahead,
mean,
Fred.
and this kind of brings up an interesting point, because there's this, well, fascism is very dangerous and it is on the rise. Most to this point, and why this is effective with the mail, most of your neighbors, most people are good people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we're seeing this trend of these change in the polls with immigration, which was Trump's strongest, but now it's its weakest. One of his weaker points is because you're seeing ICE, you're seeing actual fascistic tactics. They're not identifying themselves as law enforcement, which I don't think they are. I think they're bounty hunters. They're not operating under the color of law. They're they're snatching people off the streets and at their court hearings. And people are seeing this and going, wait a minute, no, this is one I signed up for. And that's why this tactic of use the mail, I think, is very effective, because you're letting them know, hey, this guy's an actual fascist. It's
Yep.
not this isn't a slur. This isn't hyperbole that I'm using. This guy's an actual fascist and he's living near you. And that, I think, for a lot of people really hits home. And they're like, man, I don't want fascists living near me. I'm like,
Yeah.
no. They need to go. They need to move.
So, one of the important pieces of this story is I didn't just, send out letters with my own writing in it. I printed out 200 plus copies of a BuzzFeed article that documented my infiltration of Patriot Front. Right. So there was the third party involved. There was verified, vetted facts. It wasn't just my feelings. It wasn't just the evidence that I discovered. I worked with journalists so that they could publish their story, and then I used that story for action. And this is the same type of thing that I use in veteran advocacy. When I'm trying to get a law passed on bad paper discharge or something like that, I tell my story to a local journalist about how tough it was getting kicked out of the military and all of the terrible things that happened to me, right? I tell a compelling personal story. A journalist writes that. Now I have the credibility. In my case, I grew up in New York, so our local papers stay. So I would ring. Sorry, there was a call there. So I would bring the Newsday to my local representative, to my senator's office, because that lends credibility to anything that you're doing. Like personal testimony can be impactful to a staffer that you meet in a congressional office, but it carries a lot more weight when that personal story is transmitted by and through a journalist.
100%, man. Yeah. I mean, and that's really, it's really about you. I'm sorry, I'm getting tongue tied. When I was in a political organizer for Obama back in 2012, the thing you gotta is you make politics personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can spit facts and figures at you all day. I can say, oh, the unemployment rate is this and unemployment rate is that, blah, blah, blah. But if you hear about somebody from your hometown, or you say, hey, this person lost their job, or they give a testimonial, it's much more powerful. One of the ways I say to, and similar what you're talking about is people say, well, what can I do other than protesting? And I'll tell folks, it's like, look, if a VA cut or a program has hurt you, write it on a postcard and send it to 10 of your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to say, because when you talk about cuts to Medicaid, you talk about veterans cuts, or you talk about this, I don't tell everybody I meet, hey, I'm a disabled veteran. Hey, I'm a disabled veteran. Most people will never know that I was ever in the military. It's just not something I bring up. But if, I send a postcard and say, hey, this is affecting me. I'm like, damn, I know Fred. That's hurting him. He lives just street. So I can attest to what you're saying is like, this is absolutely powerful because it makes it personal, and it shows their impact is not some faraway place. It's happening right there in their own communities.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that we, again, going back to recognizing and leveraging privilege for good, when one of us steps up, one of the reasons that extremists and JP Morgan Chase want to attract veterans to their organizations is because when we change a veteran's mind, they are more likely than any other constituency within the United States to change the mind of the people around them. So whether it's voting behavior or ethics or morals or political beliefs, right? If you can change a veteran's mind and that veteran stands up as an example in their community, people are more likely to follow that veteran or feel they have the top cover that they need to go with them, right? So it is, again, we're taking some of the terrible veteran stereotypes that have permeated our country really since Vietnam, I think, and we're helping people understand that sometimes you're just interpreting these negative stereotypes the wrong way, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like veterans can lead an extremist organization. They can become Timothy McVeigh, or they can do what I do.
Yeah.
You brought up a really interesting topic, and I know we don't have I don't want to keep you too long past the hour. I know you've probably got tons to do, but I thought about this last night and I really wanted to get your thoughts on it, is the new executive order that just came out about rounding homeless folks up. And I wanted to get your thoughts on how that's going to impact the veteran community, because I know that a lot of the homeless population are Vietnam vets, post 9/11 vets, Desert Storm vets, and people aren't talking about that. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about criminalizing homelessness, but we're not criminalizing, and excuse me, at the same time, the Trump administration is doing things like pardoning banks and throwing out deals, even with like Navy Fed, that defrauded service members and veterans of over $80 million. The Trump administration is like, oh, instead of giving that money back to veterans and active duty service members, the Trump administration is like, nah, fuck that. Right? It is crazy to me that the Trump administration is at the same time saying, big banks, if you want to defraud service members and veterans, go ahead. Go ahead. And if those veterans end up on the street because a bank defrauded them, we're going to criminalize that. We're going to throw them in jail, or we're going to involuntarily commit them. And that is the key thing about this this new, anti-homelessness executive order. It is the idea that the government is going to be more empowered than it already is, not just to simply detain people without any charges, but to declare someone as mentally ill and to just, without any due process, put them away. And that is a dream that Donald Trump has had for decades, and it's finally come true with this executive order.
Yep.
How do you think this might impact veterans going to the VA to get mental health care? Because I go to the VA for my mental health, and I know it gets recorded. It gets put into my file and it gets stored. I'm not afraid to go to the VA for my mental health because I'm this. I look fine. In their eyes. I'm married. I'm everything that they could think of as like a normal, good veteran, or normal Christo-fascist veteran. I even have Jewish on my thing, so I'm probably even safer, until they send me to Israel. But how do you feel? How do you feel these impacts may affect going to the VA for mental health?
Yeah, the Trump administration has eroded trust that has been continuously built since really 2014. I think was the Phoenix VA scandal under Obama. Now the VA. I first started getting services at the VA in 2007, and I can tell you, I had a lot of frustrations. I was in a very vulnerable situation. I had just survived a suicide attempt. I was afraid that I was going to get involuntarily committed if I talked about like my PTSD symptoms, right? So I have watched the VA continuously improve over the course of nearly 2 full decades. More damage has been done to the VA's um, reputation among its veteran patients over the last 7 months than at any point that I have seen. I think that the trust in the VA that is that has been erased, we might find out someday, might be more significant than the trust that was demolished during the Phoenix VA scandal in 2014. And it's because we have seen the complete erasure and the destruction of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. We have seen this criminalization of homelessness. We've seen the idea that the government is just going to start involuntarily committing the homeless. The veteran homeless population, like you said, there are Vietnam vets, there are young vets. Sometimes homelessness is a choice, but often homelessness is imposed on a person because they fell through the cracks, because we do not have good enough safety systems. Even veterans who have more or less, if they're combat disabled or service disabled, free access to healthcare. Even we in the United States don't have enough safety nets to prevent homelessness. And now we're going to tell homeless veterans who are eligible for the VA that they can trust the VA. That's going to be a tough sell. And in my opinion, they should still trust the VA, but I can absolutely understand why they might not want to.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I get that, because what's stopping Doug Collins from instituting a new policy that says they couldn't hand over your housing information or your housing status, because they're already discriminating in non-VA hospitals against unmarried women.
Mhm.
And that policy is already available. You put that one out, Chris, and put that news out. And I called my representatives about that. I called Steve Womack, John Boozman, and Tom Cotton about that one, my rep and my senators. You know what they said? John Boozman's office told me that that was a lie, that I should be, that there was nothing there. And I was like, you sure? Because I see the policy in front of me.
Yeah.
And I know other sources. And how do we fight back against that? Because our Republican, like I live in a Republican state district, everything. I don't, my
Mhm.
senators and reps do not listen no matter how often I call. And I'm going to continue to call. So don't stop calling
Yep.
if you're in red areas. But what can we do as maybe for those who live in very blue areas? What can they be doing to help us? Because we didn't vote for this. We didn't have anyone to vote for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. For folks who aren't in the habit of calling their member of Congress or their senators, my recommendation is just visit 5calls, the number 5calls.org. That gives people scripts on most of the issues that have like come up in the news that are important. Anything from women's access to reproductive care to any of these executive orders to Elon Musk's continued influence on the federal government, right? It is easy to influence your member of Congress if you work with people in your community to just continuously tell them, this is your opinion, I want you to record it. And the reason that this website is called 5calls instead of 5 letters is because it gives you the information on not just how to write a letter, but to call. And calling your congressional office, your representative, your senator is more influential than writing a letter or sending an email. The psychological effect and the cost in terms of resources of a person having to pick up that phone and answer it has a greater influence on that office than any other way to contact your member of Congress. And whether you're in a red district or a blue state, it doesn't matter. If you feel passionate about any issue that is related to the federal government and the way that Congress can either restrain the administration or pass a law to the benefit of yourself, your family, veterans, whatever. Doesn't matter if they're Democrat or Republican. You just need to make sure they're hearing your voice. It is far too many of us have, I think, really given up on the most fundamental aspect of democracy, and that is making sure that our representatives represent us, right?
Mhm.
The Republicans always like to say, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. Okay, fine. We're a republic. If our representatives are not representing us, like the American experiment is failing. And you cannot convince Tom Cotton to change his mind unless you annoy the shit out of him.
Yeah.
Right? Like you just need to annoy the shit out of him.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll make a difference. It could be on the margins. You know, he may not change his belief system, but he might not sponsor a bill that is terrible that he otherwise would sponsor, right? There are victories in the margins that we don't see in the newspapers, and that is done by everyday Americans who are just picking up that call and annoying the shit out of the person who represents them in government.
Yeah.
And I'll build on that because that's the thing that we talk about. Fred and I have been starting to talk about is a lot about civic education and civic understanding. Is I'm going to read before we all go, or before we end the day. I like to end on a positive note always. I'm going to read the haiku from that I started my civic haikus on. It's called Foundations. But I'll get to it in a second. I want to touch on Tom Cotton for a second because you're right. Tom Cotton isn't afraid of Arkansas voters. He's not afraid that he's going to lose his job. I don't mean fear for his life. I mean fear for his job. He's not going to lose his job yet, but we have an amazing candidate who's coming up, Hallie Schaffner. If you don't know who she is for Arkansas, please come support her. Donations, volunteer, whatever time you can give to her, because if Tom Cotton becomes afraid of her and knows that she will beat him and he'll lose his job, he'll change his ways. It's not going to stop us from voting his ass out, but he'll get the message that he's afraid and he needs to do it. So make your representatives, especially the red ones, and your senators afraid that they'll lose their jobs. So this ties into the haiku for today, which is foundations. So here you go. Civic foundation, tend her soil, prune our tree. New growth springs from care. And so
Beautiful.
that's one I've read before, but we have to remember that new growth springs because we care about our areas. We care about the people around us. We care that our communities thrive and grow. Sorry. And Chris, you have given us a lot of incredibly good information today, a lot of incredibly good things to think on and ways that we can actually act in correctly, peaceful, and patriotic ways where you're not doing things to hurt others physically. It's okay to make a fascist lose his job or have to move or even ruin their marriage in the end.
The phrase that I try to use most deliberately is impose legal costs.
Yes.
Yes, there has to be a legal cost for their action because we are the party of law and order. We're Americans. We're constitutionalists. That's why I fly the flag. That's why I wear a shirt pretty much every time that's somewhat patriotic or something. Like we keep it that way because there are symbols too. So
Yep.
I want to let Chris close out the day. But before we do, Chris, thank you so much for coming on with us. I hope you can come back again for some more talks with us. These vet talks are really, really meaningful because, like you said, it changes the narrative and it reminds people that veterans aren't bad people. Veterans are just like everybody else. We just have this extra little title that gives us a little bit extra respect by a lot of people. And we want to earn that respect back because it's our respect and we fought for it too. And it's not just those assholes. So Chris, close it out for us today, brother.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm glad that you guys are doing this show. It is really encouraging to see you guys step into the breach. You know, it is hopefully showing more people who would otherwise not know this, that not all veterans are MAGA. yes, there are more MAGA veterans than there are veterans who understand the Constitution and love it for what it is, as flawed as it may be. Right? I will admit that, but it is not a majority of veterans who are MAGA. Maybe a plurality, but there's us too.
Right.
So I'm glad you guys are out here showing folks that there are actual real patriots and that the American flag should not be associated with things like January 6th and the insurrection. We are not going to let the fascists rewrite American history, erase American history, and shape it into a fascist narrative. So for folks who are just seeing me for the first time, hi again. My name is Chris Goldsmith. I'm the founder of Task Force Butler Institute and Veterans Fighting Fascism. I'm also a co-host of the Find Out podcast, which is hosted here on Substack. We drop episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. And I also write a newsletter called On Offense, which is a way of saying that defending democracy is not enough. We have to go on offense. You can find that here on Substack, onoffense.substack.com. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. There's 200. I've been watching the counter. It's nice to see it rise throughout the conversation. Thank you all for joining us. And gentlemen, thank you for hosting me. It's been an honor.
Dude, it's been a pleasure
being.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here today, Chris. And as always, everyone, let's stop being sick of this shit and let's start doing this shit.
Heck yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
guys.